Hello, audio check, hello. Hi guys, Kenny here, and this little segment is a little different. I'm covering some photography stuff, and what I want to talk about specifically is what your rights are as a photographer in Ontario. So this covers Ontario, Canada, and the reason I'm making this video is really that there's a lot of photographers who are new, they're learning photography, and they just are not aware of the legalities around photography. So I want to kind of put this out there and provide some insight into my interpretation of what the law is. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a professor and I profess, so these are the things I'm professing. But the data and the information, I'll link it below, but it is from there are sections here taken from the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There is the Criminal Code that's included, and Trespass on Property, Privacy Act, and the website is ambientlight.ca. You can find a copy of what a really basic Q&A on what your rights are as a photographer in Ontario, Canada. And this is sort of my best assessment. This version is written in 2011. So again, I'm not a lawyer, but these are the best, to my knowledge, the best interpretation of the law I know for photographing in Canada, Ontario specifically. So the ability of anyone who's interested in photography and content creation, this will apply to you, and it's written into the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So everyone in Canada has the fundamental freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including the freedom of press and other media of communication. So this includes obviously content creation, photography, videography, things like that. Basically, this provides every Canadian the freedom to take photographs and use methods to share those photographs. This does not mean that those photographs may be used in any and all manners that the photographer wishes. Okay. So the reason there's a specific issue I came across, and this comes from teaching first-year photographers, new photographers, and it's that when they go out in public and you're looking to create work, sometimes you just don't know the law, and you have to have an understanding of the law so that you can have confidence to know what your rights are, and have the ability to negotiate any issues that arise from that, because there are going to be people out there that aren't aware of the current law and legislation. So this is a very empowering thing to do, and I encourage all photographers, if you are interested in creating work out there in the public space, to know these things. Okay, so this is wrongly also assumed to be the kind of Privacy Act. Everyone assumes they have a kind of a right to privacy. So the Privacy Act is often wrongly assumed to provide personal privacy to individuals when in public. In fact, the Privacy Act only protects personal information that is submitted to the government. So the Privacy Act is not a part of what we're talking about here. The Privacy Act is something that involves data, sensitive material, things that are in sensitive information that is exchanged between you and the government. There is a right for you to protect that information. That's all the Privacy Act really entails. Okay, so where can you photograph? A photographer can take photos anywhere that the photographer is legally allowed to be. So provided you are allowed, you're obviously allowed to go to many places in the public space, you're allowed to 3D photograph. This includes your own property, public property, private property with the permission of the owner, and this could be very casual, verbal, thumbs up, whatever, and that's all good. Essentially, where you can photograph are places where you are allowed to be. That's it. The laws regarding where you can be legally are beyond the scope of this pamphlet to properly describe and annotate. So that means, like, if you're on private property and you don't have the permission of the owner to photograph, then you may be in some gray areas. Unless otherwise notified, a photographer may take photographs when legally on private property. So that condition, the exchange of consent between property owner and photographer, needs to be clear and concise. What can you photograph? So assuming you're not breaking any laws, you may photograph anything you can see. So that includes children, accidents, fire scenes, infrastructure, residential buildings, industrial buildings, criminal activity, law enforcement officers. Common misconception, one of the biggest common misconceptions here is that you are not allowed to photograph children in public space. Now, granted, it looks sketchy, but there is nothing in the law that prevents you from photographing children and young adults, provided they are on public property and in public space. So, the most notable exception and the basic rule of thumb on whether a subject was legally photographed and is considered reasonable expectation privacy. So there is a reasonable expectation of privacy when you are being photographed. So, for example, they put an example here: a couple in intimate embrace cannot be photographed from the sidewalk through a window. That's kind of like peeping Tomish. If the couple were outside and in the same embrace, then they could be photographed legally. So there is a reasonable expectation of privacy when you are out in public space. When you are in private space, behind a window, behind a curtain. This also applies to, public bathrooms. If you are in a stall, there is a reasonable respect for privacy in those situations. So let's go cover what publishing is. So publishing can roughly be defined as displaying for viewing. This include print in newspaper, book, or magazine, display in a gallery, posting online. So you are freely allowed to publish your images. This is considered, again, a fundamental freedom of press and expression. Posting online is not limited to social media. You can post on posting online is not limited to social media sites or password protected sites. So you can be in a forum, you can be in any of the Reddit, for example. You can post in all these areas, provided you are the content creator and you're the owner of the image. So what can you publish? Your right to photograph is protected under Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Any photograph may be published with these exceptions. So these are the photos that you cannot publish. You cannot publish images you don't own. You cannot publish images that will interfere or threaten national security. You cannot publish an image that will interfere with a large number of Canadian lives. So if you're, making a picture, you post it online saying there's a big giant forest fire in the middle of Toronto, no, you cannot do that. Name or photo of a minor convicted or charged with an offense. So that's part of the Young Offenders Act, and I'm not sure if that's called something else now, but you cannot publish those material. You cannot publish a recognizable person endorsing a product or service without model release. So if someone is recognized as a celebrity, it's in kind of a gray zone with commercial photography. So you cannot photograph and show that in public or publish said images. Images modified to deliberately mislead or misrepresent what an identifiable person is doing. So if you photograph, someone who's recognizable doing something devious and it's modified, photoshopped, you cannot do that. Okay? So let's talk about who owns a photograph. Ontario does not have a law that each person has a right to their image. So if you're the person being photographed, you don't have that right to the image. This means that an image of a person is solely owned by the creator of the image, so the photographer. A notable exception is when a photographer is working for someone else. Then, unless otherwise stated through contract, the employer owns the copyright to the image. So this is negotiated through the idea of contracts. Basically, as long as you don't sign a contract, you are the legal copyright owner of your images, and there is nothing anyone can do about that. But if you do sign an image consenting to the use and ownership of your images to someone else, so, an employer, then the image belongs to them through the use of contracts. Can you be forced to delete photos? With very few exceptions, no one can make you delete photos and destroy your own personal property. This means you cannot be forced to delete memory cards or expose your roll of film. Notable exception here is when the photograph jeopardizes national security. So, if the military seizes your camera and finds you photographing sensitive information, they may delete that. They may request you to delete that or delete that for you. There are some relevant laws that are attached here with links, but essentially in Ontario, you are allowed to photograph freely, provided you're not breaking any laws and you're in the public space. And I want to enforce that. Look, we as photographers, we really need to have an understanding of the law, because without understanding the law, Canada is one of those countries where your rights are protected as a photographer. This is not freely offered or given to a lot of people in the world. So in order to have the right and continue our ability to roam the space we live in and document, create artwork, document significant events, or just be able to capture images, you gotta know your rights and know where you stand in the eye of the law. So if you are a photographer, you're an aspiring photographer, these are important things. And I show this to a lot of my students first class, because there is nothing that saps your confidence like going out there, experiencing the world, but you don't know the legalities of what you can or cannot capture with a camera. So, hope that helps you out. Cheers. Enjoy going out there photographing, making work. Take care.